Iran says this was retaliation, a response to the reported killing of a senior political figure, and instead of a limited strike, it launched hundreds of missiles at once. The scale of the attack raises a critical question. Was this a warning or the beginning of something much bigger? The escalation did not begin quietly. According to Iranian officials, more than 200 missiles were launched in a single coordinated barrage toward Israel, many of them aimed at the densely populated regions surrounding Tel Aviv. Within minutes, air raid sirens echoed across the city as defensive systems activated and civilians rushed for shelter. The scale was unprecedented. Previous exchanges had involved limited salvos, measured strikes designed to send signals without triggering full-scale confrontation. But this was different. The sheer number of incoming projectiles transformed the attack from a tactical strike into something far more significant, a demonstration of capacity and a test of limits. As reports of the barrage spread, global attention intensified. Governments, military analysts, and intelligence agencies began tracking developments in real time, trying to understand what such a large-scale launch might indicate about the next phase of the conflict. Because numbers matter in warfare. Launching over 200 missiles is not just about impact, it is about intent. It signals planning, coordination, and a willingness to escalate beyond previous thresholds. And it raises a critical question. Was this a one-time surge of force, or the beginning of a new pattern? What followed would determine whether the conflict was entering a temporary spike in violence, or shifting into a far more dangerous phase altogether. The first indications of the attack appeared on radar screens across the region. Early warning systems detected a sudden surge of missile launches, their trajectories arcing towards central Israel. Within seconds, automated alerts were transmitted through defense networks, triggering Israel's nationwide warning system. Then came the sirens. Across Tel Aviv and surrounding areas, the rising wail cut through the city, signaling immediate danger. Streets began to empty as civilians moved towards shelters, while emergency services shifted into crisis response mode. But this was not a single wave. The barrage unfolded in phases. As the first group of missiles approached, defensive systems were already calculating interception paths. Then, almost immediately, additional launches were detected. A second wave followed, then another, each arriving before the previous engagement had fully concluded. The effect was deliberate, continuous pressure. By staggering the launches, the attackers reduced the time available for defensive coordination. Radar operators, interceptor crews, and command centers were forced to process new threats while still responding to existing ones. In modern missile warfare, timing can be as critical as firepower. Each new wave compresses decision-making windows, forcing rapid calculations under extreme pressure. And as the skies above Tel Aviv filled with incoming trajectories, the challenge for defenders was no longer just interception, it was endurance. As the scale of the barrage became clear, the logic behind it began to emerge. This was not simply an attack designed to strike targets. It was an attack designed to overwhelm systems. Modern missile defenses are highly advanced, capable of tracking incoming threats and launching interceptors with remarkable precision. But they are not unlimited. Each interceptor must be launched, guided, and directed toward a specific target. Each engagement consumes time, coordination, and finite resources, and those resources have limits. When a small number of missiles are fired, defensive systems can prioritize targets, calculate trajectories, and respond with a high probability of interception. But as the number of incoming objects increases, the equation changes. Saturation begins to take effect. Dozens, then hundreds, of incoming missiles force defenders to divide their attention and their firepower. Interceptors are used rapidly. Radar systems must track multiple trajectories at once. Command systems are pushed to process an overwhelming volume of data in real time. At a certain point, it becomes statistically difficult to stop everything. Not because the defense fails completely, but because the volume of threats exceeds what it was designed to handle simultaneously. In that moment, numbers become a weapon, and even a highly capable defense network can be pushed to its limits. As the scale of the barrage stunned observers, attention quickly shifted to the motive behind it. Iranian officials framed the attack as a direct act of retaliation. According to their statements, the missile launch was linked to the reported death of Ali Larijani, a prominent political figure whose influence within Iran's leadership structure carried both symbolic and strategic weight. By tying the strike to his death, the narrative transformed the barrage from a military operation into a message, a response. In conflicts like this, retaliation is rarely just about revenge. It is about signaling. By launching such a large number of missiles, Iran appeared to be sending a clear message about consequences, demonstrating that actions against high-level figures would not go unanswered, and that the response could escalate beyond previous limits. Targeting leadership figures or responding to their loss carries deep political significance. It reinforces internal unity, projects strength to domestic audiences, and communicates resolve to adversaries watching closely from afar. But it also shapes how the conflict evolves. Retaliation narratives can create a cycle where each side justifies its actions as a response to the previous strike. Over time, that cycle can push both sides toward increasingly larger and more visible escalations, and in this case, the scale of the response suggested something important. The boundaries that once limited the conflict were beginning to shift. As the final wave of missiles descended, the consequences became visible on the ground. Across multiple areas of Tel Aviv, explosions erupted in quick succession. The impacts sent shockwaves through surrounding neighborhoods, rattling buildings and shattering windows as debris scattered across streets already emptied by the earlier sirens. Columns of smoke began to rise over different parts of the city. Some buildings sustained structural damage, with facades torn open and sections of infrastructure disrupted by the force of the blasts. Fires broke out at several impact sites, fueled by damaged vehicles, ruptured utilities, and scattered debris. Emergency services moved quickly. Firefighters, paramedics, and rescue teams were deployed across the city, racing from one location to another as reports of damage continued to come in. Sirens from emergency vehicles now echoed alongside the fading sound of the air raid alerts, creating a constant sense of urgency. But beyond the physical destruction, another impact was unfolding: psychological pressure. For civilians, the repeated cycle of warnings and explosions created an atmosphere of sustained tension. Even those who had reached shelter safely remained uncertain, unsure if another wave might follow or when it would end. In modern conflict, the battlefield is not limited to military targets. It extends into cities, into daily life, and into the minds of those experiencing it in real time. The scale of the barrage has forced a reassessment of where this conflict may be heading. Launching more than 200 missiles in a single operation is not just a tactical decision, it is a signal. It suggests a willingness to move beyond limited exchanges and into a phase where intensity, visibility, and direct confrontation begin to increase. And once that threshold is crossed, the risks multiply. Both sides now face a series of critical decisions. Respond too forcefully, and the cycle of escalation could accelerate into even larger exchanges. Show restraint, and the balance of deterrence may begin to shift. In conflicts like this, perception matters as much as capability. Across the region, governments are watching closely. Any further escalation could draw in additional actors, whether through alliances, security commitments, or economic interests tied to stability in the Middle East. Global markets are also reacting, with energy prices and financial systems sensitive to every new development. But perhaps the most important factor is uncertainty. Events of this scale often mark turning points, not because they end conflicts, but because they redefine them. What was once contained can become expansive. What was once indirect can become direct. And once a conflict enters that phase, controlling its trajectory becomes far more difficult. The next moves, made in the shadow of this barrage, may determine whether the situation stabilizes or moves into something far more dangerous.